stories of mine, written originally in English, translated into, originally in Tamil and translated into English by my sister, Usha Nagasamy. She's in London. She's a further education teacher. She started in 2009, just out of interest, just one short story. And then she got stuck. Later she didn't do, and I had to push over the back of her and got it done. And then these short stories, 15 out of the 17 short stories are Singapore-based. Singapore issues, Singapore people, and mainly because I live here. I've been living here for 26 years, and this is where I belong. This is where I live, and so writing about life in Singapore, about people in Singapore is easier for me.
This writer, she has written over 27 books, and I would like to tell a little story about how I got to know about her and about this book. So one day I received this email, Kitaab's Gmail box, that there is this book, and she had already tied up with some publisher in India. And she wanted to see if we could do the Singapore edition, and she had sent some sample chapters and all that. And interestingly, every story had an illustration, going with it. So I found it very interesting, and the stories were very simply told. Set in Singapore, some stories happen on the train, some stories happen in the household, some stories happen in the wet markets, all kinds of settings that we are familiar with in Singapore. And the simplicity of the stories really struck me. And then I proposed to her that why don't we do it, full scale, with Kitaab's brand. And luckily she agreed, and that's how we proceeded. So this sort of becomes one of Kitaab's first translated literature series. And those of you who follow Kitaab might also know that we have bought, Isa Kumari's one of his novels, Intercession, and we are translating it into Hindi and Urdu. So Kitaab is committed to doing a lot of translations, from one Asian language to another Asian language. And I believe that there's a lot of richness in the region among the writers. We don't know what's happening in Cambodia or Myanmar or Thailand in terms of literary writing, right? Because not much of the fiction is translated, especially in other Asian languages, let alone English. So we try to bridge the gap, and so this is like one effort to do it. So that's why this book is very special to me. And I look forward to work with more young writers and seasoned writers who are sitting here and who are in Singapore or in other places. So that's the journey we intend to take onwards. Do you want to read something from the book? Maybe Tea House or?
I think we can talk, I can talk about the story behind the story of just one
Tea
story.
House. Okay, sure.
The Tea House, the very first story. We were living in Yishun several years back. There was an old gentleman, a Chinese gentleman, about 82, but he used to look healthy. And whenever he sees me pass by, either in the corridor or in the supermarket or wherever he sees me, he will greet and we will start a conversation. He knows I write, and probably that was one reason. Another reason is I was always a patient listener. And he was very lonely, and he used to talk and talk. Most of them used to be bits and pieces, all incoherent, which I had to fit like jigsaw puzzles. But I used to listen. So many stories, right from his primary school days to just minutes before. He will talk so much. And then in the middle, he will just watch. As if stricken with some guilt, he will watch and ask me, "Are you in a hurry?" And then I would say, even before I answer, he would just continue playing. Because deep inside, he was hoping I was not in a hurry. So I gave him my time, and I thought that was the best and the least I could do. So he transferred so much of his memories into me, deliberately or not, I don't know. And one of his primary school stories is this the tea house. That's how the story. I didn't know till I wrote. I didn't know whatever I listened, they were going to come as stories. This is the first, and not yet another. I've never written another, but I still carry in me so many stories. I don't know whether they are going to be written or not, but that's how that story came about. And I lost touch. I hope he's still there. I didn't go that area again, so probably I should do once, since the story is good. Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about the title story, Loss and Laws? What is it about?
Yes, Loss and Laws. If I'm going to talk about the story, you will not enjoy it later. So I won't tell the story, please, Zafar, because
about the story.
yes, about the story, yes, that I will do. It's a story about an incident that happened to a maid in Singapore. The maid is not, she was not my maid. I've never had a maid in my 20 years here. It's a maid, she was a maid of another friend's friend. And when I heard about her experience, it was really, I lost sleep for many days. About 5-6 years later only I wrote the story, and another 5-6 years later it comes in English. It's an important social issue where the law loses the humanness. That's the incident. I won't talk more about that. Probably you should read it. Only then you can enjoy it more. Yeah, thank you.
So, what's going on in India at the moment? There's a lot of resentment among writers and filmmakers and intellectuals about the rising tide of intolerance that we're seeing in the country. It's a very unfortunate turn of events in India. Those of you who have been following the news stories, you might have seen how some intellectuals have been murdered. One gentleman was murdered for his based on some rumor of all kind of things. So I was recently in India and I was traveling through cities. I was in Delhi, then Bangalore, then Mumbai, and everywhere. And before that, I was in Rajasthan, and everywhere, everybody was talking only about what was happening in a very sad sense. So, and then this book, which is in solidarity with those writers, dedicated to the wounded idea of India. Now, the story Kafka and Ayodhya I wrote a couple of years back, and when there was this time when the Supreme Court was going to give a judgment on this disputed structure, which was a mosque, and which was considered to be the birthplace of law drama, and there was a lot of politics around it. It led to writing and all that. So it has been a very controversial thing in Indian contemporary history. So once I was coming from Germany, I was traveling, and I was sitting in the airport, and I thought, what if Kafka travels to India? And he sees all the drama around this structure. So that led to this story, which I am very happy to have. I mean, I have not written very many stories. Before this, I had a collection called the Singapore Decalogue, which was a collection of 10 stories set in Singapore about an immigrant. But this one has this Kafka and Ayodhya and some other surreal stories. Some of them are set in India, some of them are set here. Some stories are realistic, so there are in total 7 stories. But there are 3 or 4 stories in this collection which I feel very satisfied with. I don't count myself as worthy of anything, but the kind of literary heroes I follow, the Chekhov and the Mantos of the world, I try to be in their zone, in their space, and when I reread my stories after 6 or 7 years, you can tell, right? So, because when I write the story and I read it immediately, I'm not very sure how good or how bad it is. But time flows and you go back to the story and you see, if it still reads like good stuff, and you don't feel guilty of having it, then probably it's okay. So that was my test, and the stories I've selected for this collection are sort of those kind of stories that I think they're okay. Rest I leave to you to judge. And interestingly, I didn't know this fact that the story of Metamorphosis by Kafka, which is one of his most famous works, was written exactly 100 years ago. So when the book came out in October, came out of the press, it was exactly 100 years ago when Metamorphosis was written. And the structure of the story is like Metamorphosis. So Kafka travels with the bug in a suitcase, his famous bug. And I have not clarified what bug that is. So that's that, and then it's a very funny story actually if you read on. And you also see how media behaves in India, especially the television media. So the climax is very interesting. It's very successful in that sense. Now I think we should open the floor for questions. If you have any questions or anything about the books or about Kitaab or
I have two questions, one for each author. Jayanthi,
Yes.
I would like to ask you, because you said just now that your book was actually based on a spiritual journey, and it was a side effect of the spiritual journey that the writing took place. In other words, the focus is the spiritual journey, but the sort of like side effect was your wonderful stories. Could you elaborate on that? And then to Zafar, Anjum, is there any? I've read Kafka, everything's life is absurd. So, is there anything in your stories that has a spiritual perspective that you could share? Because I'll share a bit about myself shortly. I'm asking myself the philosophical question like meaning of life, how should I live, ethics and all that. And finding it in spirituality, the answers in spirituality rather than in academic philosophy, which is very abstract. So if you could just talk a bit about spiritual themes in your book and how they relate to meaning of life and ethics and stuff like that. Thank you very much.
I don't know whether
Maybe I didn't get it right.
Probably I was not clear enough. The reading part, I was talking about the reading part, that reading has always been bringing about some evolution within me, in the spiritual side. That's what I said. As for the book, it has nothing to do with spirituality. Although every incident in life, even every minute that we are here, we're talking individually, one-to-one, in a group. I believe every minute can have some kind of spiritual impact on us. But this book is totally a fiction.
So, can I get your question right? Are you asking that do my stories have any spiritual element in them, or were they inspired by any spiritual experience?
Yes.
Okay, no. There's nothing spiritual in my books, at least this one. And probably more carnality than spirituality.
Yes, I want to say that I appreciate you're doing something like this, because I think really, just freedom of thought, especially intellectual and among writers in India, is really at risk right now. And I say to my friends, look at Singapore and take a leaf out of their book. They are more truly secular today, the state of Singapore, than India is. Because it's bad enough that things happen by militant Hindus, but it's even worse if the government keeps quiet about it. At the very least, that act of omission is also saying something to me with us. So, I don't know if you would like to make a comment on it. I would like to say, Jayanthi, that I didn't know anything about your book, But when you talked about it, it sounds very interesting. I would love to read it, because there's always more one can discover about Singapore if one is not a Singaporean.
Thank you. Looking forward to your feedback after reading it. Thank you.
Yeah, so I totally agree with you. Like I told you, I was traveling in India and everybody was talking about these things. Ordinary people, Hindus, Muslims together. Everybody is so scared now, and they're so some people are sort of in a self-censoring mode. Should I write this piece? Should I not write this piece? So one could never imagine these kind of things 1.5 years back in India. But I could see it coming. I used to write a blog called Dreaming, and the day the current Prime Minister was elected, I stopped writing a blog. And the last blog I wrote was called The Day the Idea of India Died. You can go and read that blog. And since then, I have not written any blogs. And this story was written 5-6 years ago, and it is a satirical take on the situation. I mean, the issue could be settled, but it's the politicization around it which is the problem. And some people taking advantage of it and inciting one community against another, that's the problem. But the good thing is, people in India, and I'm very interested to see, they are fighting back. They are fighting back, and they will not allow the character of India to change. That much faith I've got now since I returned from India. When I went there, I didn't have that faith, but after coming back, I can see now that people are fighting back, they will not give it up.
Thank you.